is, building more red blood cells in your blood by putting your body at a higher altitude for a short amount of time and then coming back. So if you've read anything about climbing Everest, most people know that when you climb Everest, you don't just start at the bottom and go all the way up. You start to the next camp and you stay there for a little while, and then you go back down. And then the next time you go to the next camp for a little bit, and then you go up to the one above that, stay for a while, and then come back. So that whole process is about acclimatization and building the red blood cells in your system so that you can better utilize the oxygen you get.
And for climbing Everest, I think it takes like 5 or 6 weeks. They're there at base camp for over a month, I think, and they go, like you said, back and forth through the different camps to the summit.
Yep.
I don't know. I just find it so intriguing. After you leave, and like I said, I don't want to talk about your whole book on here, but just some high points. The day, I think it's maybe the day after you leave Namche is the first time you see the Big E. You see Everest for the first time. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
What was it?
Yeah.
What was that like? I mean, you said in the book, you mentioned that at the time you're just kind of like, your mind is trying to process all this stuff. You're in a foreign country. 2 days ago, you were here. Now you're here. Now you're getting farther away from civilization. So your mind's trying to process all this stuff. And then you see Everest for the first time. And while you're there, it's a big deal, but it's like, it is, but it's not. But later on, reflecting back on it, you realize what a big deal it really was at that time. So just for the listeners, reflecting back on that, what is it like?
I would say that anybody that's going over there probably has had some interest in Everest at some point. I was no different, and I'd read about it, and I'd watched dozens of documentaries and movies and stuff. But the thing about, you hear about Mount Everest from first grade or something. Mount Everest, just the word, is something that's ingrained into every American psyche from the time you're a little kid. There are a lot of things like that you never get to see in person. When you actually see Mount Everest with your own two eyes, it's almost impossible to really process it right then. It's just kind of amazing. You see this, there it is. You see this peak and you see the snow blowing off the top and everything. And it's just impossible to really process it then. And I'll say too, that the entire trip for me, speaking for myself, the entire thing is difficult to process. It's so unlike what you're used to if you're an American that the whole thing feels like a dream. I encourage people, anytime you do anything out of the ordinary, go to, some beautiful Caribbean island or to some incredible mountain, be sure that you take the time to stop and consciously say to yourself, this is happening. This is a pivotal moment of my life, and don't ever forget this moment. And that's what I did. Everybody was kind of stunned in our group. One thing that's interesting is I went back and did some interviews with our group 6 months later after we returned. I asked everybody about that moment and what they thought about it. And Kenny, I'm telling you, at least 2 or 3 of the people broke down into tears when they were so moved by it they couldn't even talk.
I guess the one time I've been like that is, have you ever been to Hawaii?
I never have, no. Mm-mm.
I was fortunate enough to go Thanksgiving 2017, I guess, and we left LA one morning, Friday morning, 6 or 7 a.m., and we landed in Honolulu. And you get to Honolulu, and it is nothing like you think it is. It is a city. That's all I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things we did was we went to Pearl Harbor.
Right.
You walk into this room, and, it's still like, I spent a lot of time on the West Coast, San Francisco. I've been to Seattle, San Diego, LA. And the Pacific has the same feel no matter what town you're in. It's kind of, you got a cool breeze, all the buildings are similar, architecture, everything.
Mm-hmm.
So Honolulu has that feel to it.
Right.
But you walk in and you watch this black and white video and this video about Pearl Harbor. And then you walk out this door and you're on a military base, you're on a military installation, and you get on a U.S. Navy boat with soldiers taking you out to, the Pearl Harbor Memorial, the Arizona Memorial. And when people are talking and stuff in the movie, and it's tourist, right?
Right.
The minute you walk out that door and get on that boat, it is like no one's talking. It's quiet. You get on the boat, you ride out to the Arizona, and that moment So that's probably the only time I can remember in
Mm-hmm.
my life that exactly what you're describing. It's like you've heard about it, you're there, you're at Pearl Harbor and know that, 80 years ago what went down.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just, so I follow, when you mentioned that in the book, I was thinking,
Yep.
when in my life have I ever experienced that? That's the only time I can think of, honestly.
I've got a great uncle who is still on the Arizona, who died on the Arizona and is still on it today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I've got
Wow.
a connection to it out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
You got to go. You got to go. And when you're there and you're looking over the rail and you can see the crude, the oil, the fuel bubbling up into the ocean, it's amazing. I encourage anybody to go if you get a chance to. It's pretty amazing. But anyway, I haven't talked about her a lot, but Holly's with you. Y'all are business partners, been married a long time, got 3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
She decided to take this trek 2 months after she had knee surgery.
Yep.
What was she thinking?
Yep.
It's funny because I didn't catch this the first time. And I don't know if it was because when we were walking in the neighborhood, I told you I listened to your book when we were walking in the neighborhood. I don't know if Jessica was talking to me or if a, car was coming or what. I missed the part where she goes to the doctor and you talk to her and say, look, I don't think you should go or whatever. And she kind of shuts you down and says, we'll talk about it when we get home. And then y'all have a little family meeting, and the words that she used, you said, bleep, 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 I'm going. That's pretty much, you pretty much knew at that point she was going, no matter what. And so you guys are together, and I love the stories. And like I say, it's so hard for me not to give it all away. But staying in the tea houses and some of the things that you encounter, you locked her in the room. It's just, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
I can relate to so much of what you guys experience. That's like every vacation that Jessica and I go on. Honestly,
there's a reason why I blog under the name Doofus Dad.
Doofus
the name
Dad.
of the book is Doofus Dad.
And it's hilarious, and I can relate to it so much. And you guys, you make it up, and it's like what day 10 before you make it to Everest Base Camp. Is that right?
Actually, that's day 8.
Day 8. Okay.
Yep.
The way you describe it in the book with the lower oxygen, I found myself physically having not difficulty breathing, but I was trying to imagine. Of course, I'm walking at 4:30 in the morning in Orlando in the summertime. The humidity's 100%, so the air is pretty thick, and so I'm having problems breathing anyway.
Right.
I'm listening to you talk about it. Is it scary at all? I mean, can you catch your breath, or did your body get used to it, and that's for my own benefit. That's honestly because I'm going and I just need to know this.
Well, I was really interested to see how I would react to what you're talking about. And we talk about this in the book. We took a medicine called Diamox, which is the high altitude medicine. It's a preventative and it's a medication for high altitude sickness. We were on a Diamox regimen, and the altitude really didn't bother us that much. As a matter of fact, everybody in our group was on Diamox except for 2 guys. And one of the guys was an older man who was on a different type of regimen. And then the other person was a young guy who was probably the most fit, or one of the most fit people in the group. Is a young, athletic guy in great shape, the kind of guy that you and I would be disgusted by. And he refused to take it. And he's the guy that got sick. He pushed himself too hard and was always out front and was always leaving the rest of us behind and stuff. And he went against the recommendations of the Sherpas, and he got sick. Now, he wasn't, deathly ill, but he got sick for a couple days and then started taking Diamox, and then he stayed on it for the rest of the time. When we were at base camp, I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried. Now, we were in just south of a blizzard, I would say. I mean, when we walked into base camp, it was snowing very heavily and the wind was blowing, and that was pretty intense. But we weren't afraid. At that point, my biggest concern was worrying about Holly and her knees. and getting her to Gorik, which is the last little village before you get to base camp. The next morning, when I went up Kalapatar, which is a small little peak that's beside Gorik, beside the village, that you don't have to be a climber to get up it. It's a walk, it's a hike, but it's the place where most people go try to summit Kalapatar and get amazing photography of Mount Everest. It's the best place to see the summit of Everest. And that morning, which was the morning after we were at base camp, myself and Dawa went out, just me and him. And it was 4:00 in the morning, and it was probably about 10 degrees. It was very windy and it was snowing. My little headlamp was only illuminating this little tiny circle in front of my feet. And when I started up Kalapatar, that's when I really felt the altitude. And that's when I wasn't frightened, but I was like, oh yeah, okay. Now I get it. Now I feel it. Because I would take 10 steps and would have to stop and catch my breath and take a little break and then take another 10 steps. That was the big moment for me. But no, I never got really sick. I was tired and I didn't feel great. Actually, that particular morning was probably the worst day for me until I got sinus infection later on, which I talk about in the book. But the altitude didn't really bother me, except for that one time.
The way I understand it, it's really rocky. And I think of poor Holly, it was like she pushed through and made it to Everest Base Camp.
She did.
Yeah, that's,
she did. And without giving it all away, I'll tell you that when we go, we haven't, since COVID hit, we haven't done personal appearances with the book, but for a while there, we were going and I was doing readings and signing the books and stuff. People didn't want to meet me. Right. They want to meet Holly.
Of course. She's the hero of the...
Holly's the hero
She's
of the
hero,
book,
of course. Me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, no, I get that. 100%.
Yep.
And if you don't mind, the one thing you mentioned earlier about the tea houses, your company actually lines all that up, like tea houses, meals, all that stuff. The only thing that's really not included, my understanding, is the tips for the Sherpas and all that. And you guys help with calculating all that, let you know what the costs are up front, and then your transportation to Kathmandu, right?
Right. And that has just from a practical standpoint, our pricing has changed, and we will be releasing those prices within the next month, really. That'll be our 2021 and 22 pricing. And I'll just tell you that it's a little cheaper. It's a little better.
How many days? And I know that the trek is, I think, is it 15? It's 20? Is it 3 weeks total or 2 weeks? I can't remember.
You want to block out 20 days.
20 days. Yeah. You guys left on a what? Tuesday?
I can't.
Tuesday night?
Probably so.
I think it was
a
Tuesday night. You got there on Friday morning because you lose a day going.
Right.
But you get it back coming back. But I was trying to, so Jessica and I were just talking about vacation and, what we would have to do. We have a 16 and a 14-year-old that are in great shape. Soccer, lacrosse. Would you recommend something like that for teenagers?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. We generally don't recommend anybody younger than about 12 to do it. Only because it's mentally tough. It's a mental
right.
thing, and a lot of kids, unless they've grown up hiking and camping and doing that sort of thing, they might have a tough time when it gets
right.
it gets tough. Now, there are periods where you're crisscrossing up through the woods back and forth on a trail that, you look up and you see people way up above you, little ants way up above you, and you think, I got to go all the way up there. And that's when you got to be mentally tough and push through. But Kenny, we saw there was a 10-year-old kid at base camp when we walked in, because I talked to him and asked him how old he was. People of any age pretty much can do it. I just wouldn't recommend it until you're at least 13 or so.
Yeah. Well, by the time we go, they'll be 17 and 15 and will hate our guts and not want to do anything with us anyway. So it'll be much cheaper,
Right.
Yeah. The 10-year-olds at places like that don't bother me. what bothers me most of the time is when you're huffing and puffing doing something